Hello everyone. Today we're talking about chapters 13 through 18 of the Half-Blood Prince. And there's a lot going on in these chapters, so rather than pick a big theme this time, I want to touch on several different things that stood out to me as I read. So the first is a tiny bit of in-text discussion of narrative perspective. Harry and Dumbledore are accessing these memories in the pensive that are mostly acquired from other people. And because of the virtual reality quality of them, it's tempting to think of them as objective and complete, with the obvious exception of Slughorn's corrupted memory. But we are careful readers who've been thinking all along about narrative perspective. So it's gratifying and a little bit ironic when Dumbledore comments on the narrative perspective explicitly. When they're about to hop into the memory of the orphanage, Dumbledore says to Harry, "This time we are going to enter my memory. I think you will find it both rich in detail and satisfyingly accurate." This, of course, implies that the other memories were not up to this standard. It's also a funny line because, of course, everyone thinks their own memories are accurate, but Dumbledore has no impartial standard for this. There's actually no reason to assume that his memories are more accurate or objective than anyone else's. But I appreciate that this direct attention to narrative perspective is part of the book. It is a good reminder to us to be applying the same awareness and skepticism to all of the narration and looking for the signals that it might not be objective. Okay, another small thing that jumped out at me was Percy at the Burrow on Christmas. When I've read this series in the past, I've always sided against Percy. He's breaking Molly's heart. He sent Ron that letter telling him to ditch Harry and calling Umbridge delightful. And he now knows that Harry was right, but he still won't come make up with everyone. And all of this is still true. Percy is still the worst. But reading these chapters last year and again this year, with the political divide and even the reality divide in America getting more and more extreme, I can't help but thinking about how awkward it would be to have Thanksgiving with my family of origin. I am definitely the odd one out, whose beliefs are so fundamentally different from everyone else that even if we don't talk about those beliefs, it's still pretty uncomfortable. And I know some of you have mentioned in class having kind of similar experiences. And Percy's always been a little different. I have no doubt that his family loves him, but he doesn't fit in. And he's still on a different page ideologically, even if there's a new Minister for Magic and a new recognition of Voldemort's return. So now I'm more able to read Percy as representing someone who maybe goes away to college or does a study abroad semester or moves somewhere for a job and really finds their place and meets their people and figures out what sort of person they want to be, and then has a hard time knowing how to be that person when they're back with their family of origin, even if they have a wonderful family who really wants to accept them. Harry, as our narrative perspective, is not going to be able to recognize that experience because the Dursleys have been so consistently abusive and antagonistic throughout his life. So Harry's never been in the position of having a loving family that wants to be him to be his real self, in spite of not sharing the same perspectives anymore. But I can imagine a character like Hermione really understanding this. In fact, I would guess that it's a common experience among Muggle-born students. One more way in which the magical world is harder for Muggle-born witches and wizards, even if it's not on Harry's radar. Anyway, so Percy's not off the hook, but, I see you. I see you, Percy. The holidays can be hard. The next thing that stood out to me is that we're suddenly seeing a big jump in emotional intelligence from Harry. I talked in the last book about how strikingly bad Harry was at deciphering or even really taking an interest in other people's emotions. And throughout the series, he's been very much in his own head, which often made him not the best friend to Ron and Hermione, and really not ready for romantic relationships. But in these chapters, particularly chapters 14 and 15, Harry's showing so much more awareness of the people around him, especially Ron and Hermione. He's aware of their initial attraction and romantic tension, and then when things start to go wrong between them, Harry's aware of that too. After 5 books of almost exclusively Harry's feelings, we're getting lines like, "Ron went to bed as dejected and hopeless as ever," and Hermione had become so tired of Ron's recent unpleasant behavior that she had not come down to breakfast. If we were reading emotional insights like this in the first book, I might actually assume that we had a genuinely omniscient narrator. But we know that we're functionally limited to Harry's emotional perspective, so the fact that we're now seeing this kind of thing means that Harry's finally paying attention. And not only that, but he's doing emotional labor. He's doing it reluctantly and clumsily. The text often reminds us how uncomfortable he is with people crying, or really any display of vulnerability or strong emotion. Harry just doesn't know what to say. But he still tries. He goes looking for Hermione after she flees the common room where Ron and Lavender are kissing. He listens to Ron and Hermione or just sits quietly with them, allowing them to lead and allowing their dramas to be central instead of his. I think it's progress for Harry and a sign of his maturation. Outside of Ron and Hermione's romantic saga, Harry also discovers that other people's feelings are a surprisingly big part of being a Quidditch captain. Because Ron is an inconsistent keeper, with his skills really dependent on his confidence and mood, Harry keeps a really close watch on Ron's emotions. Honestly, it's a little bit sad that it takes Quidditch to get Harry attuned to his best friend's feelings. But Ron is having a lot of feelings, and they're affecting not just his playing ability, but also the feelings of the rest of the team. And that's landing squarely on Harry, who, again, I swear puts more emotional labor into trying to get Ron into the right headspace for this one Quidditch match than all of the Ron-related emotional labor that he's done in books 1 through 5 combined. And that kind of brings me to the last thing I want to talk about today, which is the way that magic is used within peer relationships in this series, and how that's a little bit gendered. So to explain what I mean, throughout the series we see a lot of magic being used on objects and sometimes animals. Sometimes that's relational, like Hermione fixing Harry's glasses, but it still falls within the category of doing magic to stuff rather than people. In the category of using magic on people, prior to this book, we've seen mainly magic used on people in relatively specific and limited contexts. On the one end of the spectrum, there's healing. Madame Pomfrey and the St. Mungo's healers do magic on bodies to heal them. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's the magic that characters do to their enemies. This includes the unforgivable curses, but also lesser hexes, like the one that makes Neville dance in the Hall of Mysteries, or Barty Crouch Jr. as Moody turning Draco into a ferret. The DA practices hexes with each other, consensually, but the intention of this kind of magic is to use it offensively against enemies, even if that's just a student from an opposing house in the halls before a Quidditch match. And there are examples kind of in the middle of the spectrum, like the twins skiving snack boxes or Ginny's bat bogey hex. So I'm not trying to say that Hogwarts students don't perform magic on each other ever. But it slowly dawned on me how relatively restrained they are, and how much their relationship with their friends aren't mediated by magic. So much of their adolescent tensions and struggles and joys are relatable, specifically because there's no magic involved. So in many ways, they're just going through their dramas like Muggle teens would, and on the whole, they don't seem tempted to resort to magic to sort out their pubescent trials. Because there must be a temptation. Like, you want to know if someone's into you, you could use extendable ears into their dormitory. You do something stupid in front of your crush, you could obliviate them. You're not happy with some aspect of your body, you could use magic to make it bigger or smaller or a different color or whatever. You notice your ex chatting up another student, you could make their body do something weird or gross or embarrassing or cover them with warts or make them smell bad. There are so many possibilities, so many things that students could be tempted to try that would actually make their teen years at Hogwarts very different than Muggle teen years. Some of them are harmless things that would just change the vibe, but some are also creepy, stalkery things, some non-consensual things, some vengeful things. But for the most part, the students don't. And I'm not sure why. If it's a decision that Rowling made to keep things relatable, or if students lack the skills or confidence, or if there are rules or talks or classes that we don't see about how the standard for consent and privacy and restraint has to be so much higher when you have all the power of magic at your disposal. If not, there definitely should be those kinds of classes. Otherwise, adult relationships, marriages, and friendships are going to be weird too. But this is the book where we start to see a bit of Hogwarts students using magic on each other within the context of their friendships and relationships, by which I mean on other students that they care about, rather than their rivals. And their school curriculum facilitates this. In Transfiguration, they're finally learning to change their own bodies, and there's a big focus on potions, which are almost always to be applied to human bodies in various complex ways. But one thing I noticed in these chapters that we read for today is how this use of magic on other students relates to gender. Specifically, it's primarily the female students who are doing it. The male students try to control female bodies in totally ordinary ways. For example, when Ron tries to control Janie's romantic life, he just uses his words. In the end, he does try to hex her, and we don't see with what because he misses, but on the whole, it's sort of a slut-shaming scene that we would see on a Muggle sitcom. Similarly, though we don't actually see it, Cormac McLaggen seems to try to physically overpower Hermione under the mistletoe at the Slug Club Christmas party. This is gross and problematic, as is Harry's response of serves you right for bringing him just to make Ron jealous. But it's nothing that a Muggle teenage boy couldn't do. In contrast, the female characters sometimes resort to using magic to control male bodies. Hermione does bring Cormac to the party to make Ron jealous, which is a not uncommon Muggle teen move, but she's also confunded Cormac at the Quidditch tryouts to get Ron a spot on the team, and she later sicks magical birds on Ron. Meanwhile, it seems that love potions are the go-to magical weapons for Hogwarts girls. We've talked a bit about this. A lot of readers see love potions as a stand-in for date rape drugs. And the way they're introduced at the Weasley twins' shop as something fun for girls to use on boys really reinforces the idea that boys or men being sexually assaulted is just something silly. Of course, love potions become more serious when we see them in the context of Merope and Tom Sr., and yet the Hogwarts girls are all giggling in the bathroom and plotting how to slip Harry a love potion so he'll fall for one of them and ask her to Slughorn's party. Sorry. That we're back in the realm of comedy becomes really clear when Ron accidentally eats the chocolates that Romilda Vane gave Harry and briefly becomes infatuated with her in a very silly Ron way. Would this be depicted as funny the other way around? Or what if Ron had accidentally eaten love potion spiked chocolates from a male character? Clearly, love potions are creepy, but I think they also underscore the way that female characters can use magic on the bodies of male characters, but not the reverse. And I'm curious why that is. Are there rules? Is there some sort of code, some magical equivalent of I'd never hit a girl? The other question this points me to is broader. If magic can level the playing field in so many ways, for example, by making wizards greater physical size and strength compared to witches mostly moot, or by putting reproductive choices in the control of wizards and so on, then why are we still seeing so many of the same patriarchal structures and sexist power dynamics across this whole magical society? Why doesn't magic change this? So I will leave you with that question for now. I'm interested in your thoughts.